Hello and welcome to Candid Conversations here on WDLive at the Women Deliver 2019 conference. Today, over the next 30 minutes, I'll be having a conversation about equality at the workplace. How do we ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to explore their full potential and contribute their quota to the work that makes the world go round? My name is Justice Baidoo. I'm a journalist from Joy News in Ghana, and today I'm joined by two fabulous women who have been working and contributing here at Women Deliver. Anna Falth works with the UN Women, and Caroline Codsi, founder and president of Women in Governance. Welcome to you both, and hope you're having fun at Women Deliver.
Yes, very much
How's
so.
it been? Tell me about it, Anna.
Great, excellent. And even so, we're very excited because tonight we have the Culture Night.
Right.
And we'll have a lot of activations and a lot of different ways to express more culturally what women's economic empowerment and women's empowerment and gender equality is all about.
Right. So tell me about your work and what brought you here.
So what brought us here was really to put an emphasis on the future of work. It's really a concern of ours at UN Women that the future work is on everybody's mind, and technology is a big piece of it. And we know that women are not 50 equally represented in the technology areas in STEM, science and technology. And we also see that the forms of employment are not being as strong as it used to be. So we talk about the gig economy, the platform economy, and it's really linked to access to social protection. So if, for example, you are no longer a formal employee of a company, but you are a contractor or some other way you're getting your salary from that company, but you don't have the benefits. You don't have health care. You don't have access to pension savings. You don't have that package. How does the future look like? And we have from the US an estimate that about 50 to 70% in the next 5 years of US employees will actually be freelancers. So what does that mean if to access to social protection? So we have had a number of our own events, but also participated in other organizations and partners events to talk about these issues.
Wow. A lot on your hands.
Yeah.
Anna. So, Caroline, you also founded now the president of Women in Governance. Tell me about your organization and what has brought you here.
So I will start by telling you why I'm here. I was actually nominated by the Prime Minister on a national committee for gender equality. We are 16 leaders from across the country, and Women Deliver is the main project that we've been working on for a while. Thank you. Very delighted to see, I mean, it is way beyond my expectations. I think way beyond anybody's expectations. We were talking about 6,000 and then 7,000, and now we're talking about 8,000 people here and 100,000 people all over the globe virtually. So I think it is a huge success, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. Now, Women in Governance, the goal of Women in Governance is to bring more women onto the corporate boards. The statistics are quite alarming in Canada, just as in the US actually. We don't have any legislation. There are no quotas law, contrary to European countries. So we are lagging far behind. So Women in Governance does a lot of work in terms of developing female leadership, in terms of cultivating male ambassadors, male allies. We mentor women, we offer them governance training, we do major events. I've had the privilege to do a lot of fireside chats and interviews with heads of states, former heads of states, heads of companies, and really talk about why. Why do we need more women? Why do women need more diversity at large in decision-making bodies? What does that change in terms of financial performance, in terms of branding, in terms of employee engagement, innovation? So what we've also created 3 years ago now is a parity certification, which we have built with the pro bono support of McKinsey & Company based on their Women Matter research. So we've been really looking at what organizations put in place to allow women to progress from entry level all the way to the executive and the board. We really need a pipeline of female talent. We're not just looking at what's going on the board. That would be too easy to just say we're adding 1 or 2 women and we're reaching, maybe the parity zone. We're really looking at all the different aspects regarding the recruiting, the retention, the compensation, promotion of women at every single level, as well as the targets and the strategy that organizations put in place to move the needle.
Right. It's interesting that we're having this conversation today because yesterday I spoke with people from McKinsey on this report,
Yes.
which was talking about the future of work and how challenging it will be for women to keep up in terms of the findings going into the next 10 years. Tell me, Anna, what do you think has accounted for this huge problem that we have on our hands now that means that women really need to do sometimes 2 or 3 times more work to be able to gain the same sort of recognition in the workplace as their male counterparts? Why? What are some of the underpinning challenges that creates such a situation?
Wow, that's a big question because it is maybe fundamentally it's about societal values, social norms, stereotypes that feeds both society's expectations on what a woman and a man should be doing, but also the girls themselves who see what's out in the society and try to figure out their ways through life and look at those stereotypes and think that this is what they can do. They don't see the enormity of what they can accomplish if we had removed those stereotypes. And as you can see, we also have the Unstereotype booth just outside here, which is an initiative of UN Women to really fundamentally address those stereotypes. And we are working with companies in removing stereotypes in marketing and advertising because that's a big factor that contributes to this problem. We, of course, also know that education system is reinforcing this. We know that leaders reinforce it, so we work at different entry points to really change the perceptions of what can a man and a woman do and what can they accomplish. So we are really so much behind. So now when we are entering into what we call the 4th Industrial Revolution, there's so much lagging behind because of the catch-up that women have to do in terms of technology and other things. And the perception that women are the ones taking care of the children, of the elderly, of the sick, is causing a big problem. Not only for women entering into the labor market. In fact, in the European Union, 25% of the women who are not at work say it is because of their care responsibilities. So it's not... it's a fundamental problem globally. It's not only in developing countries where the infrastructure might not be there, but it's everywhere, this issue. And it's really holding back. And what we're also trying to do is to engage men to take more responsibilities to address these issues and be part of the children's lives, to be part of the household responsibilities so that those can even out eventually. And that, I'm sure, it's also impacting the women's participation on boards, how much additional time they have to spend on these extra
Well, I couldn't agree more with your comments, Anna. I think there's a fundamental issue that needs to be addressed, which is, to this day, men are contributing a lot less than women are at home.
Yeah.
So even in terms of taking care of the elderly, women are not only taking care of their own parents, they're taking care of their husband's parents. So this is a huge issue, and a lot of organizations are now putting an emphasis on giving time off to men, not only during their paternity leave, but flex time. And you know what? It's one thing to implement a policy, and it's something very different to actually make sure that it's being followed and that the culture allows it. So in our certification, we will ask proof that there are policies, but then we will ask how many in percentage are actually using it. Because if you put in place a policy and everybody feels that they're going to be frowned upon or that their career is going to be stalled because they're actually using it, there's no benefit there. And women will definitely benefit from men leaning in. And you know what, leaning in at home, but you know what, at the end of the day, we must also recognize that some men want to take some time off.
Yes.
They want to take care of their children. We need to allow that. It needs to become something that is acceptable and that is encouraged by organizations and by their peers also.
Yeah. And if I could just add one point on that, because also the unequal pay, the pay gaps that we have in the workplace also play a role in who actually takes the time off.
Okay.
So we know that the ILO standard is 14 weeks of paid up to about 2/3 of their pay during the 14 weeks of parental leave. And if, so you take a cut of about a third, or depending on the country, it might be 25%, 20%. And that cut, if the man earns more than the woman, of course the cut will be larger. So evening out the salary and the wages in the labor market will also help tackling this issue of who stays home and take care of the children and the elderly and the sick.
Right. It's actually interesting, both of you talking about this, because I work in Ghana as a documentary filmmaker. And recently I was working on a documentary on unpaid care work and how that stands in the way of women who wants to get into everyday work, and it's even more serious for women in developing countries, because we have extra challenges that women have to endure. So, for example, there are places where communities without electricity, for example, women would have to rely on firewood. Have to go fetch firewood. Make sure there's water for the home. You don't have running water in the house, so they have to fetch water, cook, bath babies, get them ready for school, and sometimes even get the men themselves ready for work. So it's very challenging, but it's also good to see people like yourself, women, in such high positions and leading the way. What can you share for women who are out there who are also watching and looking at you and saying that if you have made it to the top, they too could get the what can you share as a woman who is setting out into the corporate world and wants to get up there? Anna.
Who wants to progress
Yes.
in a company?
Yes.
I mean, I think
What has worked for you?
What has worked for me? I think, I mean, I'm extremely passionate, and I think that it's really going with what passionates you. And it's not, I remember immediately after university, people were asking, why are you taking this path of economics? So I have a master's in economics, whereas many of my friends went into the business side. And they were like, why are you choosing that path? Because you won't earn as much. You won't have so many job opportunities. And I would say, no, but I need to be where it passionates me. And that's what can drive you. And that's where it will take you places. That passion and the commitment to make a difference, that's what takes you places.
Right. Caroline?
Well, I want to add something to the great comments that Anna was making earlier about the unconscious bias, which is a problem for women, and also the lack of role models. So that is a reality. But there's a third issue, I think, that faces women, which is the lack of sometimes audacity or courage to come out of their comfort zone. So that sort of leads me into explaining what I think has been the key to my own career success. I'm from Lebanon. I was born in Beirut. I grew up through the Lebanese Civil War. I arrived in Canada at 22 and a half, and I was very ambitious, and there was no stopping me, quite frankly. I didn't even think of a glass ceiling or differences between men and women. In my mind, I was in Canada and anything was possible. So I just really bulldozered my way in a very gentle and feminine way, but I did. I was very focused and I wasn't scared at all. I mean, you come from a war-torn country, nothing's gonna scare you. No bullies at work, nothing. So I just did what I had to do, and I kept raising my hand and saying, I can do this stretch assignment, and doing things that, I'd never touched. I said, I'll work it out, I'll figure it out. I was, there was a masculine side to the way I tackled my career. So my career progressed, very quickly, and I landed vice president, executive vice president roles, and I thought, where are all the women? Why am I the only woman at the decision-making table? This is why in 2010, I ended up founding Women in Governance. I was executive vice president of a medical expertise firm, the largest in Canada. That was my job, and I never thought that I would actually become a leader in terms of closing the gender gap in the workplace. But 2 years ago, I actually quit my job to do this full-time. I now have 8 full-time staff working on this across Canada. And I really encourage women to simply leave their comfort zone, do things they've never done before, overcome their fears, and this is where the magic begins. This is where it all happens. I think that is my key piece of advice.
Yeah.
It works. I need to dare.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I always try to challenge me. I was started off as a very, very shy girl. And I always challenged me to go and do things that I haven't done before. And I remember at the university, they were always saying, but why do you always volunteer to do a presentation? I said, this is the time. This is a safe space to practice, to make a presentation. Imagine when you're out in the workplace, you might get fired for it. So I always try to push myself. And the biggest fear that I had was talking on the phone. And and I was so scared. And I actually become a telemarketer to overcome that fear.
Oh, wow.
So it's really to kind of push yourself to do things that you hate, and to come over those barriers so that you are no longer fearing anything. Once you being a telemarketer, you fear nobody on the phone. Once you made a presentation to hundreds of people, then you can make a presentation for 20 people. So it's really kind of trying to push the boundaries and not be afraid of making mistakes.
Right. Great.
And actually making a mistake is how you stand up after
It's part
the
of
mistake.
the success
Exactly.
journey, isn't
that
it?
people judge you on.
Yes.
Exactly,
Yes.
and I would add to that resilience
Yeah.
is one of the key characteristics of a leader who is going to last. Because you can be smart, you can be strong, but if there is going to be a difficulty and that you're going to collapse and you're not going to get up, you're not going to get up fast and stronger than you were because you've just learned from something, then you're not going to last. And that's something else that I got from the war, perseverance, courage, resilience. And these things translate extremely well in, everyday life and especially in the corporate world.
And these are exactly the characteristics that anyone needs in the future of work. So we call them the 21st century skills and characteristics. So
I'm here to stay. I'm a Rota Relief.
Exactly.
But Anna, you work in UN Women, which is a very important organization, a very strong one at that.
Thank you.
And organizations like yours are going to be very crucial going into the future, especially with the sort of conversations that we are having here. We know we've just put together the Sustainable Development Goals, which has as a key component gender equality, protecting the rights of women and giving women a chance to develop and all of that. What do you think organizations like yours and other organizations that are here working at Women Deliver could and should do going into the future to help ensure some of these things that you are outlining happen in order that the gender parity that we seek is achieved?
So, thank you for that question. One of the key mandates of UN Women is we have a strong convening and coordination role of the UN system, but also of other stakeholders. So I'm leading a program that focuses specifically on women's economic empowerment and through responsible business conduct. So through this program that we are doing with ILO and the European Union, in Canada, US, Japan, and in the European Union, is really to emphasize the power of partnerships. How we bring partners together, how we collaborate together, because there's so many different initiatives that are happening and everybody wants to make a contribution, but not always concerted and together. And I think together we are stronger. So I think we play that role.
That's also one of the themes here.
Yes.
Together.
The power of us.
Power of
yes.
us.
And we also have, and I brought a card, so I just wanted to show And we will have conversations afterwards on how we can partner up and collaborate.
Delighted to hear
But
that.
we have our women's empowerment principles,
Right.
which are principles that we have about 2,300 companies that have now made commitments. It's really around getting gender equality and women's empowerment in the workplace, in the marketplace, and in the community. And we are really working with them to take really bold steps towards gender equality. And we are collecting the good practices to use that as learning materials for other companies around the world. And we are zooming in on equal pay, on women on boards, which in fact are mini parliaments around the world. Each company has their own board, and it's a mini parliament of decision makers, and that's why we want women there, but we also want to make sure that women have the opportunity to grow. And you talked earlier about the recruitment and the retention and promotion. One really important area that we want to advocate more attention to is the re-entry. So once both women and men have been out of the workplace for a long time, when they come back into the labor market, it's very challenging if they've been out for 5 or 10 years. What is the facilitation to get them back? So we are looking at this as a global framework and really trying to get more companies on board, more partners that can work with us in also showcasing what works and what doesn't. So I mean, I can talk for hours and hours, but I'm sure that we don't have that much time. But
the future looks good, obviously, with all of these that you're talking about. If we're able to get all of them working,
exactly.
But Caroline, your work also has to do with governance and women in. And again, I'll go back to my own example coming from Ghana. We've recently been having a lot of debate and conversation around how we can have women in governance in our democratic process. I mean, Ghana, in many ways, is a shining example in terms of democracy, elections in Africa. Unfortunately, we still have a long way to go in terms of gender parity in public office. So our parliament has probably less than 30% of it being women, and it runs across the cabinet, local level, and all of that. And people have been asking, are women not doing enough to earn a place at the decision-making table, which is key, right?
It's absolutely key. So a couple of things. First of all, many African countries are actually doing phenomenally well. Ethiopia, Rwanda. Yes. Rwanda is #1 in the world in terms of parliamentary women. Yes. Canada's not doing that well. I'd like you to know, I'm not sure I'd like you to know, but I need to tell you this, we're at 54 out of 195 countries. So Rwanda is #1 because after the Civil War, they actually embedded in the constitution a legislation that requires parity. On boards, parity at parliament, they've been doing phenomenally well. They have many women CEOs, and they're keeping at it. Ethiopia, same thing. Now, what part of it is women's fault? What part of it is society's fault? The part that I believe is, I don't want to call it women's fault, but where women could make an extra effort is what I've mentioned just earlier in terms of raising their hand, saying, I am ready for this and I deserve this, talking about their accomplishments, being proud of what they've done and showcasing it. We are too humble, and men, in the meantime, are doing the right thing, which is, going after what they want. In the meantime, we're staying in their shadow. So there are things that women need to change. But I do believe that many countries on this planet, especially the European countries, have legislated, or Rwanda, for instance, but in Africa, but in Europe, if I look at France, they've legislated, and I know Marie-Josée Merman very well, the deputy who wrote the quotas law in France. She's come to our event. She's invited me to speak at the National Assembly in Paris about the situation of women on boards here. They've been highly successful in actually reaching their goals, which was 40% of women on boards. We are between 14 and 22, depending on what you're looking at. Are you looking at the TSX 60 or more at large? But our numbers are not good. We're even in the better companies, the larger ones, the publicly traded, we're still at best at 22%. That is half of what France has accomplished. So, you know, there are very easy ways to very quickly reach a goal. And that's not because women are not competent. That's not because women are not, don't have the experience or the education. We are 60% of graduates, university graduates. We're here. It has to do with other systemic issues. Yes. And I strongly believe that legislation will not be required forever, but to at least start a certain movement where they will have no other choice than to actually look for these women that they say they cannot find. If I look at Quebec, the province where I'm living, the government has legislated for the crown corporations. They reached 50% within 5 years. That's just Quebec crown corporations. The rest of Canada, no. So you legislate, you find the women. You don't legislate, you find excuses.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you
it's
for
really
that.
interesting. The conversation is getting really interesting, but we've got a few minutes to go. And I'm so sad we are going to have to end it. But I would want to hear from you what your parting shot will be, what your wrap-up comments will be about this very important topic. Anna, what are you taking away from Women Deliver?
The power of us.
Mm.
Yes. So I think that what everyone can take away is really the power that they have to make a difference. So you may think that, oh, I'm just one person, but if everybody thinks I'm just one person, nothing will happen. But the power of us is really a key message. And what we are seeing is with the millennials, they are not just like in the previous generations, happy to get a job offer. No, they go and they interview the company to make sure that that company meets their expectations. So they want to know, are you inclusive? Are you diverse? Are you, in California where my son lives, do you have avocados? So there's a lot of demands from young people today, and they can decide and they drive the war for good talent drives actually many companies' action on gender equality. They want to be the one attracting the best talent on the market. We see the same with brands and consumers. We see that consumers are picking brands that make sense to them, that have a reputation of being a sustainable and social responsible company. We see the same, and we've had actually a few conversations here at Women Deliver around gender-lens investing. We see investors are seeing it as a risk of investing in a company that doesn't pay attention to gender equality and women's empowerment. And so everyone has the power to make a difference. And that aggregate power is the power of us.
Right. Caroline?
So I want to say that nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. And definitely what I've taken away from these few days here is how the power of us will actually prevail. I'm fascinated with what's going on in the world these days. On the one hand, we do see these millennials with very strong values that are very demanding in terms of environment, of gender equality, and really wanting to join organizations that will be aligned with their expectations in terms of values, also, as you mentioned, consumers. And on the other hand, we see some very, very concerning changes on the political front. And I mean, you know, one of the key subjects here was around abortion and all the laws that are changing around the world. So I'm really glad to have heard a lot of commitments from heads of state that they're going to keep an eye on this issue and stop the nonsense.
And can I just add one last thing? Because I'd really want everyone to come to our website, empowerwomen.org. And look at the principle, look at the 23 companies that have already made a commitment on the women's empowerment principle.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much, Caroline. And thank you very much from wherever you watched us from around the world. Anna says, and we all are saying, that you too can do something to ensure gender parity and to ensure that all of us have an equal opportunity to make an impact in the world. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Justice Baidoo.